Okay, so I'll try to cover this in one slide. I'll see if I can get it all done here. The big ideas. Basically, three very, very important ideas, and they are somewhat more complex. I mean, there's more to Cicero than just this. You'll need to read it all, but what I want to get to are the three big ideas here. First are his ideas on stasis theory. It's also called constitutiones, if you wish. And these are basically a series of heuristic questions or issues that should be addressed in the course of any argument's invention process, or really in the process of the argument itself, if you wish. But certainly it's something you should think about during the invention process, especially for forensic speeches. Now, the example that he gives in the text really is about forensic speeches, but it's to be used with almost any type of speech, any of the three types of speeches, forensic, deliberative, or epideictic, doesn't matter. But he's giving you the forensic because really it's easier to demonstrate with the forensic. Remember, the forensic speeches are the kinds of speeches that are usually thought of as being legal cases, right? Where you're arguing or making speeches in a court of law about guilt or innocence or lawsuits and things like that. So they function, if you know anything about debate, for example, they function kind of like the issues of the debate. You know, in debate you have things like significance, solvency, inherency, disadvantages, all of those kinds of things. So it functions kind of like that. If you have a debate background, you'll know what I mean. But essentially, what you've got to do is get around to answering or grappling with four really big questions. Every single argument deals with these four issues or questions at some point, at some level, at some time in the course of the argument. And especially with the forensic speech, it's easy to demonstrate. The first issue is the conjectural issue, and that is that you have to determine what has happened. What is the thing that occurred? What is the state of things today? And of course, obviously, in a criminal case, it would be, did a crime occur? Did something happen? Did so-and-so die? I mean, you've got to prove that before you can do anything else, you see. And here's the interesting thing. These build on each other. So you've got to get to the conjectural question first. What has happened? Did the victim die? Yes. Did the victim die of a gunshot wound? Yes. Did the victim die of a gunshot wound? What type of gun was it? When did it happen? Where was the bullet entering the body, and how many times was the person shot? Where did this occur? All of those kinds of things. What has actually happened? This is a finding of fact type of issue, and it must be decided before you can ask the second question or move on to the second issue, which is, what type of thing is it? Is this a murder? Is it a suicide? Is it an accident? If it's an accident, what type of accident? Is it murder in the second degree? Is it murder in the first degree? Is it manslaughter? Is it justifiable homicide? What kind of thing is it? Okay? And you've got to determine those two things before you move on to what's called the translative or procedural issue, which is, how should it be dealt with? Well, obviously, if it is, a justifiable homicide, then it needs to be dealt with in a very different way than premeditated murder, you see. But you can't answer that third question. You can't move on to that third issue until the first two issues have been dealt with. And then finally, this is the phase, the qualitative. What do we do about all this? Okay? How should it be dealt with is not the same question as what are the possible legal equitable remedies available to us. So once we determine, for example, that someone has committed first-degree murder, what are our choices? Well, there's life imprisonment, or there's the death penalty, or there's this or that or the other. What are our possible, and what is the right way to go? Remember, equitable remedy. What's the right thing to do in this case? So do you see it builds on each other? They have a relationship there, and they are procedurally they're sequential in nature is the word I'm looking for. They're sequential, and they are a heuristic. Now, he's using forensic. You can do it with deliberative, and you can do it with epideictic too. It's a little harder to do with epideictic, but you can certainly do it with deliberative. Think about how you might present the case for a piece of legislation and how it might be important to follow these four stases or issues in developing your argument. You ought to think about these things in advance. Now the arguments are going to play out during the process of the forensic or deliberative or epideictic speaking situation, but you have to deal with these in advance and think about them. You can't just think about them on the spot like that. Now, one of the things that he's also very, very well known for, and I'm just going to go over this very quickly, we can talk about it more in class, is his famous six-part structure to a speech. And generally, this is a forensic or deliberative speech. I think it works better actually as a deliberative speech than anything else. When you're proposing a new law or a new policy or something like this, works fabulously with Toulmin's claim of policy type of argument. The first section, and remember they have no paragraphs, okay? This is not paragraphs, this is sections, parts, okay? And today, writing in paragraphs as we do, we might devote a piece of a paragraph or a full paragraph or more than one paragraph to any one of these parts, so that the exordium, where you get on the good side of the audience, you open with something that gets their attention, you dispose them to like you, and that sort of thing. You might do that with maybe a joke, depending on whether the circumstances warrant it. You wouldn't do that at a funeral, probably. Well, you might, I guess. But the exordium is the opening line or two. Maybe more than a few lines. Maybe it's a story you tell to open with. But the idea is to get the audience to like you, to be favorable to you, to be willing to listen to you, and to win their attention. The narratio is sort of a narration or a history of the background of what it is that is at issue here. Okay, so if I'm going to talk about something like, I don't know, some very complicated medical problem that someone has, then I need to give some background, meaning I need to educate the audience a little bit, not over their heads, but a little bit, so that they feel like they can make a decision and they're fully informed enough to do so. When you're talking about complicated laws dealing with very complicated and technical subjects, you've got to bring the listener up to speed on what it's about, or they can't make an intelligent decision. That's the purpose here. This is not telling stories for the sake of telling stories, the narratio. This is not giving history just for the sake of giving history. It's doing all of that for the express purpose only of preparing the person who's going to make the decision, the audience members, to properly and fully be informed to make that decision. Now, the divisio, some people think of it as one thing, some people think of it as another. In your text, of course, the translation says that it puts some distance between your argument and that of your opponents. I like to think of it as sort of laying out for the audience the different possible solutions to the problem. Well, my opponent says we ought to do X. Back in history, they used to handle this by doing Y, and today I'm going to tell you a new way we ought to do it. We ought not do it the way it's been done. We ought not do it the way my opponent says to do it. We ought to do it the way I'm going to advocate, and that's option Z, X, Y, Z, right? And you lay all that out, and you tell the auditor at that point what direction you are going to go in this speech and what it is you're going to be advocating. That's the point there. Draw the distinctions, draw the battle lines, and tell them what you're going to be doing. The confirmation, of course, is what that means, is confirming that your option is the best option, right? Your proposal is the best proposal, and you've got great reasons for it. The refutation, of course, is to refute the opposition. And notice that if you set up the division properly, you confirm your option and you refute, when you get around to it towards the end, the other options that that you laid out for people in the beginning. It's a kind of a nice, neat wrap-up if you do it that way. Now, the peroration, if you bother to look, for example, at Murphy's synoptic history of classical rhetoric, the writer in that chapter on Cicero, I think, makes it much more complicated than what Cicero actually does. If you want to reduce it down to its bare essentials, the peroration or conclusion, really Cicero, if you look at it, consistently says throughout, he just simply wants you to combine emotional proof, right, an emotional reason, with a direct call to action. He wants you to tell the audience what to do and give them some emotional impetus to do it. And the reason for that is emotion without telling them what to do gives them no guidance. Telling them what to do without giving them an emotional reason to do it gives no assurance that they'll actually get up and do what you're asking them to do. It's emotion that really drives us to make the decisions, to take our decisions and put them into action. And I think it's a very insightful thing on his part, to recognize that human beings really are like that. Now, the final thing that I want to make sure that we bring up here, that you're on the lookout for as you're reading through here, is the extensive discussion here of the ideal orator, and of course de oratore, oratore is where he really puts a lot of this out there. Notice, of course, several things. One, it's a very Isocratean approach, very broad-based education. He's not at all out of line there. He's very much more Isocratean than he is Aristotelian on some points. Take a look at that. See if you can spot that as we go through. He sees the orator as this pragmatic savior of the state, for whom delivery is really the most powerful tool. His emphasis here is on delivery. It's power to move an audience. Now that's really important. It's not style. It's not invention. It's not memory. It's not arrangement. Even though he thoroughly discusses all those in the other texts, it's delivery. He believes. How you present it to the audience, and that would be all of the verbal and all of the vocal and nonverbal and facial expressions. All of those things. The way it's presented to the audience is extremely important to Cicero, and by all accounts, he was really the best at it. So he had a good reason to think that that was a powerful thing, because being so good at it, he certainly was able to move his share of audiences when it came to that sort of thing. Broad-based education, yes. Does he believe, like Isocrates, that it takes natural ability? Absolutely. And in fact, he's probably on that score more Isocratean than he is Aristotelian. He's a bigger believer in natural ability than just about anything else, although when we get to some other things, we'll see how he feels that way, why he feels that way. But it's very pragmatic. It's very patriotic, too. He embraces that from Isocrates. Be on the lookout for that. He thinks that the job of the orator is to be the great savior of the state.